nominations for the President of the United States are set, and some are happy with the nominees. Others feel like they're voting for the lesser of two evils. So how would God's Word evaluate these leaders? John MacArthur offers timely insight on Grace to You. Welcome to this special edition of Grace to You. We're interrupting our regular schedule to bring you the second part of a study that John began last week. It's titled, Who is God's Candidate? John has already looked at what God requires of government leaders and how a nation can experience God's blessing. Today, he's shifting the focus to show you the types of character traits that you should look for in a leader, the qualities that are worthy of your support and your vote. Now, we'd like to get a copy of this lesson along with the first message from last week in your hands free of charge. If you requested the CD last week, there's no need to do it again, but if you missed last week and you want a free copy of both parts, Who is God's Candidate? Visit online at gty.org, or in the United States, call 1-800-55-GRACE. I'll have more contact information after the message. Right now, here's John MacArthur to continue his look at who is God's candidate.
Does the Bible require anything of rulers, or is it just a theocratic issue? If you're a ruler in the kingdom of Israel, God has requirements, but beyond that, He doesn't care what rulers are like. Is it just that God cares what pastors are like and elders in the church and leaders in the church and really doesn't care about other leaders? The truth of the matter is, God has requirements for all rulers, all those who have authority over people. The separation of God and true religion from government is a disaster, because now you have led people to believe that the law written in their heart is not binding, and you now confuse the conscience, which is the personal restraint. And you define behavior that is acceptable in ways that are inconsistent with God. You literally free up people to live in open violation to the law of God, which is a kind of inevitable spiritual, if not physical, suicide. Government should never separate itself from God, from the true God and the true law of the true God. The chaos of the nations, the chaos of our country, the chaos of any country, the chaos of the world is always related to a rejection of God and God's revealed law. All godlessness, all irreligion, all immorality leads to the destruction of a society. I want to give you 10 characteristics that the Bible requires of a ruler. Here are the 10 characteristics of a ruler that God blesses. I'm going to give them to you, and I'm going to give them to you in a list. 1 is worship. 2 is righteousness. 3 is justice. 4 is wisdom. 5 is honesty. 6 is morality. 7 is humility. 8 is teachability. 9 is security. And 10 is courage. Those are specific attributes that God requires of rulers. Turn to Psalm 2. Psalm 2. Why are the nations in an uproar? Why is the world in such constant chaos? And the peoples devising a vain thing, useless things. The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against His anointed, meaning, of course, the Son, saying, let us tear their fetters apart and cast away their cords from us. The rulers of the world want to free themselves from their accountability to God and God's anointed. But He who sits in the heavens, God, laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Then he will speak to them in his anger and terrify them in his fury, saying, But as for me, I have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. I will surely tell of the decree of the Lord. He said to me, You are my son, speaking of the Son of God. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will surely give the nations as your inheritance, and the very ends of the earth as your possession. And you shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall shatter them like earthenware. Now therefore, O kings, show discernment. Take warning, O judges of the earth. Worship the Lord with reverence and rejoice with trembling. Do homage to the Son, that he not become angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath may soon be kindled. How blessed are all who take refuge in him. Any ruler, any king, any person in authority who shakes his fist in the face of the true God, who rejects God and rejects God's law in any way, will find himself under the terrifying judgment of God. The executioner here is the Son of God himself, who will crush all such rulers who refuse to worship the true God and take himself the nations as his own inheritance. Nebuchadnezzar, the pagan king, who says, speaking concerning God, after he had learned a really terrifying lesson, being turned, as it were, into an animal, he said, I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever, for his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, but he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of earth, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, What have you done? At that time my reason returned to me, and my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the glory of my kingdom, and my counselors and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true and his ways just, and he's able to humble those who walk in pride. That's what every leader on the planet ought to be saying. Every leader ought to give the testimony of Nebuchadnezzar. That ought to be in the lips of the President of the United States, the governor of every state, the mayor of every city, and every judge who sits on any bench. And that means worshiping the true God, and that means worshiping the true God in spirit and in truth. God requires that of every ruler. Secondly, God requires righteousness of every ruler. Righteousness, that he adhere to the law of God. Listen to the last words of David, 2 Samuel 20.